Oh, yeah.
Rocket Raccoon is the only thing holding the Guardians of the Galaxy together. He's the abrasive, gun-toting, explosives-loving glue that truly makes the Guardians a family. Okay, fine, I think everyone's important, but Rocket holds a special place in my heart, and I'm sure yours as well. But what exactly do we know about the lovable, genetically engineered trash panda?
Ain't no thing like me except me.
Well, actually not much. Today we're looking at Rocket's tragic origins in the comics and how the MCU might adapt things differently for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Is now the time to talk about Rocket's first sidekick before Groot? I think so. Let's get into it. So where does Rocket come from originally? Given that he looks like one of those things that you'll find rooting around your trash every now and then with the scary human-like hands, it's easy to assume he came from Earth. Like I always thought, some aliens were cruising the galaxy looking for kicks, stumbled upon Earth, found a stray raccoon, and then thought it would be funny if they genetically altered it to sound like Bradley Cooper. I mean, I just assume all aliens' favorite movie is The Hangover, because why wouldn't it be? But in actuality, his origins are a lot different in the comics. And actually, it's quite a sad story. Rocket originally comes from a planet called Halfworld, a planet that housed the galaxy's mentally ill. Originally, aliens ruled this planet, but soon abandoned the project and did what any lazy person would do: get a robot to do the job for them. They created a staff of robots to help the mentally ill on the planet, and then left. Of course, why should you ever trust a robot in comics? After radiation from an exploding star made the robots act glitchy, things changed. The robots didn't want to do the job anymore either, so they started using genetic engineering to alter the mentally ill's pets so that these pets could take care of their owners instead. And that's ultimately how Rocket was made. Rocket was eventually appointed sheriff of this planet and went on an abundance of adventures with his first sidekick, Wal Russ. That's right. He's a walrus named Wal Russ. You don't get any more clever than that. Kudos to those comic writers for really going above and beyond with coming up with a unique name for Walrus the Walrus. But you know what that actually means? There was someone before Groot in Rocket's life. But how will this relate to the MCU, if at all? There's actually a lot we don't know about Rocket Raccoon in the MCU, which honestly is pretty surprising. We learned all about Peter, Gamora, and Drax in the first movie, and then the second movie had a whole arc where Rocket learned to appreciate his makeshift family more. You would think that with all the time with Yondu, something would have come up about Rocket's past, but nope, his past is still a big mystery to us. All we've really gotten is his line in the first Guardians movie where he drunkenly yells at Peter that he didn't ask to be made and didn't ask to be torn apart and put back together over and over again. That's already sad without any context. But knowing his comic history, are they about to make his origins even sadder? Sure, James Gunn seems to have no problem tweaking characters and backstories in a way that fits the story better, like with Yondu or Ego, but I feel like Rocket's comic backstory is just too weird and too kooky for James Gunn to not want to adapt it faithfully, don't you think? And because Rocket seems to have memories of being ripped apart and put back together, but also didn't know he was a raccoon, makes me think that he for sure didn't come from Earth. So what is the best way to capture the tragic nature of his comic past and tie that into what we know about the character in the MCU? Well, I have some thoughts about that. For one, I think you should keep the idea that he was made to help the people living on Halfworld. Sure, he was made sheriff and had a few fun adventures, but I think it would be a really great character moment if they revealed Rocket was made as basically a servant and spent his early years helping people. For one, I think that would reframe everything we know about him in the MCU. The Rocket we met at the beginning of Guardians 1 only liked looking out for himself and for Groot. No one else. He didn't care about saving the galaxy at first and wanted to save his own skin. But as we got to know Rocket, we realized that wasn't who he was at his core. He not only was a character who would risk his life to save everyone, but also he gave some great pep talks over the course of his appearances. Think about it. He gave Drax some tough love when he needed in the first Guardians, and he applied that same sort of stern discipline when he was telling Fat Thor to get it together on Asgard in Endgame. At his core, it looks like he was made to help people, and turns out he's pretty good at it. So if you keep that element development, then we'll have to explain what happened to him that made him so selfish and self-serving to begin with. The way I could see it happening is that Rocket was made to specifically help someone on Halfworld first, but then that person dies, and it shatters Rocket's belief in caring about people or helping anyone, and that sets him on a path to become the gun-loving sheriff of Halfworld, which of course sets him on a collision course with Groot. Because I want to keep all the crazy robot stuff in Rocket's origins, but I also want to tweak it, where after these robots used up all their animals, they started genetically engineering other things too, and that's what would cause Groot to be born. And now, jaded Rocket would see that the robots made life out of a tree and turn against them. He's tired of watching other things be brought to life by rogue intelligence, and realizes it all needs to stop. He ends up breaking Groot out, destroying most of Halfworld, and going off into the cosmos with his new tree friend. That would explain why Rocket cares about Groot so much. Rocket's backstory overall will most likely be touched on in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and finally answer our burning questions about where the lovable Rocket came from. And given how much James Gunn seems to love tragic backstories, it would make sense if he adapted Rocket with only a few minor tweaks. Now we just have to wait and see what happens. Seriously, as much as I love a Rocket and Groot pairing, I really want to see Rocket team up with Wal Russ. Can you imagine being a bad guy and getting beat up by a raccoon and Wal Russ? That would be both terrifying and embarrassing. Come on, Volume 3, show us Wal Russ. You know you want to. Anyways, thanks for watching CBR. See you next time.